what's interesting is experience design becomes a great uh, companion or that complements architectural design. Because architectural design typically comes at it through thinking about volumes of space and making sure that you have capacity for folks that go through there. Experience design arrives at the space afterwards once you've thought through what the activities are and the journey is in and out of that space. So it's another way to get at spatial design and design of buildings.
Hey, we've got a really exciting episode for you today with Gideon D'Arcangelo from Arup. In our conversation, Gideon shares his experience between the physical and digital interaction design. It's an emerging field that questions the relationships of bits and atoms. He breaks down the mechanics of digital experience, what needs to be true for digital twins to become the norm, and his advice for young designers coming into the field. Whether you're a designer, developer, or student, you're going to get really great value from Gideon's insight. So let's get into it. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0. Today, I'm speaking with Gideon D'Arcangelo, principal at Arup. Gideon, thanks for chatting with me today.
Glad to be here, Jose.
To dive in, talk to us. Why buildings? Take us back as far as you can remember.
It's very interesting, my trajectory that brought me into architecture and working in physical space. I actually started out in the digital medium, really, and ended up in buildings. And so in the early 90s, I worked on one of the first interactive media projects that was going in New York, a big project called the Global Jukebox, where we used data analysis to look at audiovisual recordings and map them out and look at big patterns of global style. It was funded by the National Science Foundation. It was funded by Apple. It was a real cutting edge thing. It was pre-internet, it was pre-web. So I started out in digital interactivity and projects like that. And then in the mid 90s, clearly this digital interactive field was going to blow up and was looking for a place to do that. I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York. I've been here my whole life. Much of that was happening in San Francisco and Boston, but there was some activity in New York in those days. And I went to work for Ed Schlossberg at ESI Design, who had an interactive environment design shop that just created interactive museums. And so I was part of the digital team, but we had an architectural team as well that was doing the interior fit outs of spaces, the physical design aspects. And we were making interactive exhibits and putting software and content and technology into spaces to create that new breed of participatory hands-on museum where you were asked more to interact as the visitor, not just look and read. And so got into working in environments and then over the years worked for several decades in this field from that point on, always working in a digital realm, but in a place and in a physical environment. And, fast forward to today, now it's an expectation that buildings have technology integrated into them and that buildings produce volumes of data that needs to be thought through and understood and sorted out. And so I feel I was at the crest of the wave of that integration of technology into the built environment trend.
So talk me through this. If when I hear a digital experience, I think screens and just general software. When you talk about the physical infrastructure and then the digital experiences, for a layman like myself, like how do you start to think about this? Like, what's the framework? Why digital in the first place? Why is it important?
Well, let's talk a little bit about digital physical integration to answer that question. I think, what's happened over the past 10, 20, 30 years is the introduction of the digital medium, into our society. And it's really, frankly, blown people's minds with what it can do. And I was thinking about, Jaron Lanier, I think is the person who was attributed with coming up with the concept of cyberspace. It could be apocryphal. I'm not 100% sure. He used to talk about cyberspace and meat space, where, the real world. And there was this division that came up when we got so excited in learning about the digital world that we have this idea of cyberspace at some other place than where we reside. In fact, as we all know, there's only one world out there. All the computers are still sitting on planet Earth. And it's such a powerful introduction of a new medium that people think of them as separate, digital and physical. In fact, whenever there's a new innovation that's introduced, it takes people a while to integrate them back into normal life. And so there's a big design problem now of integrating digital and physical. I think in 50 years, people won't even think about that. In 100 years, people will come into the world and they'll be, oh yes, there's the digital layer, just like they pick up the telephone. It's just when I was a kid, that there's this moment where people really think of it as separate, and there's a design that becomes a design problem to design them so they come back together and work together as one. And so one way that we do that is, I think, through experience design. I practiced experience design, which is really thinking not about digital or physical, but just thinking about human experience and how to make it excellent. And so when you start with experience design, then you have if you ground it in the human element, you're going to create a physical environment. You're a place where you can have an experience, whether it be learning experience or a social experience or an entertainment experience. And then you're going to find the means to deliver that, whether it be through a digital medium or some content that you put in or a sign or a person that's standing there, a whole range of things that go into experience design that then set you up to integrate that ultimate human experience at the end.
Walk us through that process. So let's say we've got an existing building and we're trying to consider what are the right frameworks to define what success can be, right? With this kind of digital physical integration. How do you think about that? Like, what are the questions you're asking yourself about people, their experiences? Walk me through that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we start with who are the people? Who are the users? We take an approach that's pretty much out of UI, UX design for interfaces, but that apply it to buildings, apply it to spaces. And you say, who are the people that are coming? Who's our audience? Who are our customers? Who are our visitors? And it's always a diversity of types of users, but it's not everyone in the world. It's going to be, if it's an office building, it's a certain demography. If it's a stadium, it's not. So who's coming? Young, old, technologically astute, or technophobe, from diverse backgrounds, etc. And you identify who those users are. And then typically we take them on their journey through that building. And, of course, the buildings have different functions, but we take them on their journey through that building. What's it like? Before they arrive, how do they know how to get there? When they arrive, what's it like when they pass the threshold? How do they find where they need to get to in the building or go to their usual spot?
And when you're doing that, is the mediums, are you thinking through this kind of as in the form of narrative, diagrams, visuals? I'm curious in the design
Yeah.
process, like how do you think through that?
Yeah, all of the above. The narrative of the experience, a journey line diagram where you map out the user journey and you go through their typical use. If it's an existing space, you might go do a fair amount of user research and find out how do people use this building today, and do the user research to map out existing user journeys and look for pain points, friction points where that journey is not so great, could be improved. An elevator that waits too long to get there, or a confusing spot where the wayfinding doesn't work. And you identify pain points on the journey line. Those are usually clues as to where you could come in and improve the experience through design. And if it's a new build, you're often envisioning a future state that you have to do some hypothetical planning of that day in the life to map out that journey line, but it's still just as important. So you map out those journey lines, and then you say, well, this is where we are. How can we improve this experience to make it frictionless, to make it delightful, to make it really that people feel anticipated and their needs have been thought out, and not just one user group, but a whole variety of user types that come with different needs. I mean, this gets applied to healthcare environments, transit hubs, office buildings, schools. It's a universal approach to improving design. And what's interesting is experience design becomes a great companion that complements architectural design. Because architectural design typically comes at it through thinking about volumes of space and making sure that you have capacity for folks that go through there. Experience design arrives at the space afterwards once you've thought through what the activities are and the journey is in and out of that space. So it's another way to get at spatial design and design of buildings.
And that's fascinating. That's something I had never considered. The role of the physical stuff as a way to create volumes and to be the canvas, if you will, of activity, and then the role of the digital. What is success, right? Like what is the digital trying to accomplish? Is it's not trying to accomplish creating volume. So what's the role of the digital relative to the architectural's setting of the volume?
It's probably communication first and foremost, and providing information. Also, it is making the space more responsive and reactive. So there's a few different ways that can go. Yeah, I'll go back to a project I did for PNC Bank when I was at ESI Design. This is some years ago, 2015, where we put a data visualization in the lobby of a ultra green skyrise building that had a very dynamic brain or building automation system at its heart, making lots of decisions about how the building could perform to improve its performance and reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. And the building was very smart, but the occupants of the building would not had really been aware of all the smartness. We wanted to communicate what the building was doing, and also there was an aspect to that where the occupants of the building could improve performance the better they understood how the building needed to behave and open and close windows at key times when they received indicators about environmental conditions, and they could become a partner in the performance of the improvements of the building. So there was a need to communicate what this building was doing. And so we tapped into the data of the building automation system and visualize that so they could look and see at any given time, oh, I see, we're not relying on energy from fossil fuels at the moment because we were able to shut down HVAC systems at this moment, open up the natural ventilation systems, and open up the facade of the building, and learn about how this building had been designed to have a more lifelike quality to it by looking at the data that was coming off the building. So I think the digital aspect probably in the current moment is all about thinking about the data of buildings.
What's that future look like? What you mapped out there is a fascinating notion that, with the right experience, the tenants could actually learn how to engage with their physical environments as a way to improve it.
Yeah.
5, 10 years, as you see these different technologies evolving, what are you taking stock of? Like, what is the technology that you're paying attention to? And what do you think is looking like in, a few years' time?
I think it's going to be more about automation in the 5, 10 years time than even the occupants having to play a role in the performance of the buildings. I think it relies, as I was just saying, on the data aspect of the space. It's a new concept, really, that we had in uh, previous eras. A developer wasn't thinking about that much about the data that their building was generating. Now it's a critical competitive aspect of the building.
The notion is fascinating. You talked about the data itself. Um,
Yeah.
one area where I'm less clear is the capturing of that data. So you suggested that the performance, whether HVAC systems, is somehow then visualized. I presume on screens where folks could actually see what's going on. The capturing of that data. Are you suggesting that we're in a place where building systems are somehow connected, capturing this data and then translating into visuals? Is that walk me through like the mechanics of that?
I think there's some degree of which the data of a building environment needs to communicate to the occupants, and there are things that you could learn, for example, about air quality, for example, as you're walking into a space, or if you enter a floor, where is the natural sunlight currently happening, or where are the people congregated versus where there are empty spots. And so the degree to which you can have sensors information and telling you how the building is currently behaving so that you can choose your behavior within it. I think there is a degree of that we're going to see more of. I think most of that data is going to be going back to into the facilities management team that working behind the scenes. They also need to see how the building is performing. And as that data comes in, for example, hey, we've noticed this conference room is empty right now. Let's actually make a quick decision not to expend as much energy on running that room. Or we're detecting that this team uh, tends to collaborate all the time in this space. So let's set that environment up so it's ideal for collaboration. We won't treat it as if it were the place for individual workplace activities. I think that's where the data is going, where it turns into action. But really, then the next step is that, frankly, you'll be able to start to train models on that building's performance so that over time, those decisions won't even be made by facilities managers, but could be made by a system that the facilities managers tend to, that are making decisions about optimizing HVAC use, for example, in a building. I do think, and I don't know if you've talked about that a lot on your program, but where I think the castle on the mist right now is the digital twin. And we think a lot about that at Arup. We are working on these digital twin activities for our clients. It is a really powerful concept of digital physical integration because it's essentially the idea that for every physical asset, you have a digital simulacrum, to use a fancy word, a simulation of that physical asset in which you can do a number of things with. And so to me, that's where I think things are going in an interesting way. And I think that the general public, there'll be interest in seeing digital twin, and there's the occupants of the building will get some value out of using a digital twin. I think that the people who operate a building will also gain value out of it, and I think it'll just become more particularly something that helps in the automated running of a building as it becomes smarter with use. So digital twin, the way we define it at Arup is a combination of things. It's still being defined and is really defined, it's purpose built and is defined by each specific use case. However, the main elements of it are, in most cases, a strong three-dimensional model of the building that then gives you a way to spatialize and understand data. It's then a series of data inputs where we're through sensing, we're getting a variety of data through building management systems or IoT, and then analytical software that then's making sense of that data to look at patterns of use. Once you have those three things together, you're now able to do scenario planning. What if scenario planning on the building? You say, okay, well, what if there was a day when there was this emergency happened, or what if there was this day when only half the people showed up, and start to simulate what you would do with the building to deal with that scenario, program it to do so, then try it out in real time, and then see if you were right, and then feed that back into the system and create a system that learns with use. And that's the promise of digital twin that's out there that is pretty enticing that we're seeing that in every sector. And I liken it to the early days of the web. Everyone knew they needed a website. They didn't know why, and they didn't know what to do with it quite yet. That's sort of how I feel about digital twin.
Right.
Yeah, everyone knows about it. They need one. They think they have one. In a few years' time, the conversation will be more like, "What are you doing with your digital twin?" Not, "Do you have one?"
In regards to that, the promise of the digital twin, you have a front row seat as to the latest and greatest and what's being deployed in these projects. What needs to be true in order just to run a thought experiment for every project to have a digital twin? Is it a series of cost implications or technical implications or getting the right buy-in from the right owners or stakeholders? What needs to be true in order for
Yeah.
every project to essentially get to that future?
That's a great question. A lot of things need to be true. One avenue would be using the tools of design and construction to prepare for operations. And that is that BIM model that's being created throughout the design process is an asset that is very difficult to pass from design to construction, but huge strides are being made in that area. And then also difficult to pass from construction into operations, where with good planning, it's not necessarily a huge additional expense. If you're planning for that digital twin use, that handoff of the model after commissioning, that needs to happen. And that's a lot of coordination. You really need strong developers, strong owners up front that are going to set their project requirements and say, if you want to play on this project, this is the pathway of this model from design into construction into operations. I think that's a key piece. The other piece is then having a strong data model and data governance policy and a variety of things around data strategy for that building up front, so that that wonderful data that's being collected goes into a systematic structure that can then be deployed in that model. And then the last bit is the analytical software that then works upon that data in that environment, which is probably more custom to each environment, I would imagine, as we start to do that. And it's more particular to the use case of whether it's a lab, a hospital, corporate environment.
Right.
And so those are some of the reforms that need to happen in the industry to make this a reality. And I
Yeah.
think we need to see some wins. We need to see some big wins where some adventurous, pioneering developers go all the way on this to show the value. And once they do, then lots of folks will follow. In my mind, it's an absolute cultural imperative, though. Digital twins will happen in major ways, and they are happening now. But there's also many things calling themselves digital twins that aren't quite yet because it's a bit of a frenzy.
Do you find that there's any trend either like sector specific, whether it's institutional, commercial? Are there sectors that are gravitating or pulling this kind of feature in faster than other sectors, or is this just kind of a broad?
I mean, we're seeing it in the energy sector, for example, and one of Arup's biggest digital twin projects is in the UK with creating a digital twin of the energy grid, or what's called the energy spine. And the way you share financial data is pretty well thought out in the world because of the value of that. We're starting to see the way you share energy data comparable, and that you need these standards that anyone who's participating in the grid, putting energy in or taking it out, adhere to. So it's just like taking money in and out of the bank. There's a standard way of recording it across an entire nation and across an entire region. So the energy sector is ahead in this space. I think, there's the aviation sector is quite interested as well. It's something I know a fair amount about, and so we're seeing it in airports. Airports operate like small cities, and they're something of a captive environment where it's another place where certain of those features we talked about that are required to put together a digital twin are more controllable and in place.
What are some of the catalysts that allow us to be here today? In other words, like we're in a place where we can explore what digital experience can even be. What were some of those major breakthroughs? I mean, we often talk about the iPhone being a pretty critical moment, but what has evolved recently that's now allowing us to kind of reconsider whether it's wayfinding or digit data visualization in spaces? What are some of those key breakthroughs that allow us to be here?
That's a great question. Certainly, the proliferation of mobile devices is part of it. The lower cost of computing is part of it, and I think the lower cost of digital displays is another part of it. Because when I started in the field, we would fit out a lobby of a corporate headquarters with a very expensive set of media architecture pieces to make this announcement that, you know, this was a different kind of architectural environment, not just marble and steel and bronze, but in fact, the material was LED and content and software. And it was expensive, very bespoke design innovations. And where I see it going now is that the notion that this type of audiovisual material is going to be integrated throughout buildings, throughout the environment, is now affordable and expected, and not necessarily a big fanfare that it's happening, the big announcement at the gate, but something that permeates the built environment. Just that, that we expect now, and this is where I think the next wave of experience design is happening, is that we're really talking about integrating this digital aspect into the physical environment everywhere, down corridors, in bathrooms, not just at the front gate. So I think there, greater architectural skill in integrating technology into the built environment is also something that's come about. I think that it's become, I like to think of it like another material. Like I like to think about audio-visual technology like a choice of whether you're going to put marble in your lobby or you're going to put um, something that's communicative, a digital piece that has software running on it. It's challenging. It's part of the skill set of doing this digital physical integration is taking different types of practices. Like software development is agile and happens on a different rhythm than the Gantt chart of an architectural build out. And so the skill is getting the, you know, physical environment to line up with the technology integration, to line up with the software development and the media production, so that they all converge on opening day and all work together. And so it's a level of interdisciplinary integration that is pretty new.
Is there a space or a project that you've worked on that you feel is perhaps one of the most elegant materializations of this, right? Does a particular space stand out to you as like, this is kind of the benchmark of what digital and physical integration should look like?
Well, I mentioned the PSC Beacon project earlier. The one in Pittsburgh is a beautiful confluence of data, software, and physical installation in a building that reflects what that building is about and communicates what it's doing, that I'm very proud of having had a chance to work on. And right now, I'm working, the project that's underway is really trying to push the envelope of that. And this is a project that will open in 2026, but it's the new Terminal 1 at JFK Airport, where we're pushing on this. And we're taking an approach to the passenger experience for international travelers that are coming in and out of New York City. It's only international travelers in Terminal 1, and mapping their journey from curb to gate and gate to curb, and putting interventions in along the way, working with the architectural team to add a layer of art, branding, and digital experience that create a unique sense of place, that let you know that that tell a story. And the story is, you're in New York, and you could, this place that you either are departing from or coming to is could only happen in New York, and has a strong sense of narrative and sense of place. And as part of that, our team is putting in, for example, a narrative line that really tells that New York story. To do a project like New Terminal One, it's an incredible orchestration of different skill sets. And so you have, and this is true of any well done experience design, it's highly, highly integrated. And there's different skill sets that are involved that are nuanced in how they work together to create a seamless outcome. The end user doesn't know. They just come in there like, that was great. That's all you want. But to get there, you're working with graphic designers, technology designers, art curators, storytellers, writers, filmmakers, architects, engineers, working with the base building, working with the architectural team, and working with the retailers, working with the revenue team. A whole amazing orchestration that needs to happen, that requires a type of horizontal intelligence to connect all the dots at any given moment to produce the outcome. And that's why I always think of experience design as an integrative force. Like, it's in any organization or in any project, it is an integrator, because it's more about horizontal integration as it is to delivering a vertical deliverable or outcome. And most complex environments want that, or they need that horizontal integration, because you have so many trades, so many things going on. Bringing in this piece that's more about connecting across silos tends to produce a more interesting place.
10 years from now, I'm strolling through the airport with my wife and little girl. What's success? Going through that new Terminal 1, what would success be for you?
Well, for your family, it would be that you said, that was wonderful. We should have come here a bit earlier. We didn't have enough time in this airport. That's what success would look like, actually.
Yeah.
You're like, that was a great experience. And in fact, usually I'd come to the airport and I'm just in a hurry to get through to my gate. But actually, I wish we'd showed up an hour earlier. That's what success would look like. And think about that, because that's for airports, that's not really the vibe.
Right.
But
Right.
I think, and more specifically, that you went to the airport and you felt calm where you needed to feel calm. You felt excited where you wanted to get excited. You felt like you had free time to browse and look around once you kind of got oriented on your gate. And all of those things, that you felt like you were in good hands at every step of the way, and delighted by that. So that you thought, wow, I really want to always fly through this airport, through this terminal.
Yep.
And so it's a bit of a nonverbal thing you're looking for. You're looking for that deep feeling of being well cared for and anticipated, and so that you would tell your family, oh, that we had this great experience the other day over there. You should check it out.
I totally get excited about a future where it's a delightful experience to kind of go through
Yeah.
JFK. You've had the benefit now of over 3 decades of experience. I like to end the session by asking, what's a piece of actionable advice that you would give your younger self, or perhaps a designer, engineer coming to the industry today that in the time you've been in the industry, you
Yeah.
could serve up one or two bits.
Yeah. I'd say to a young designer now who's interested in experience design that you should take the lead. You should be taking the lead on design and getting out front. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how design traditionally has happened in the world and how buildings have been designed to date or spaces have been designed. I mentioned earlier the idea of, there's the notion that there's a volume of space and then we figure out what needs to happen within it. Actually, right now, I'm working on a project to reconceive downtown Providence. And so it's a project that Arup's working on right now. And to do that project, we took an experience design approach to a whole downtown district, which was such a wonderful scale to work at. And we did the research on the various users. We did the day in the life. We did the journey lines. We identified the key users. And as a result, and then precipitated from that, started to design some buildings, some spaces, some walkways, some pathways that would support that amazing journey. And so we took the lead on that. And so by taking this experience design urban planning approach, I think we've come up with something that's very dynamic, and it's a different way of going about it rather than having said, oh, we're going to start with a building here and a building there and a building there. And I'm very excited about that approach. And that's the advice I would give any young designer who's interested in experience design, is that this can be a lead design position in creating spaces and a different way of thinking about architecture.
I love that. And on that note, Gideon, I want to leave it. This was incredibly fun. For folks that want to follow you, your team's work, where can they find you?
Well, just to go to arup.com and under experience design and find out more about all that we're doing in the experience design space.
Awesome. Get in. It's been a pleasure.
Jose, what a blast. Great to talk to you. Great questions.